what is something that exists in condo documents? It could be a ticking time bomb that you think every association needs to look into because maybe when it was during the 70s or the 80s or at some point it seemed like a good idea that the developer slid it in there, but now it's just waiting to be a problem.
I think leasing is a trap because there's so little case law on grounds for disapproval. There's one case, if someone applies and the use that's expected by that owner is contrary to the documents, like maybe they have a truck that's too big or a dog that's too large, then you have the right, in my opinion, the obligation to reject. That's pretty much it. So criminal background, there's no case law. And most documents don't say the word criminal background check. They say you have such information as the board reasonably requires. That's receiving information. That's not requiring the owner or the buyer or the tenant to provide a social security number so they can have a criminal investigation done to determine whether there might be a ground for disapproval. And that's where you got to go to counsel because there is no case law. It's kind of a touch and feel. Also, when you have minorities, those who are protected by fair housing laws, where there's historical data that they tend to have less fair shake in the system, will have more arrests, potentially more convictions. So when you're in that situation, you have to be extra careful that you're not in disapproving creating a fair housing complaint for you, or B, a wrongful rejection. Now, a wrongful rejection in a lease is not as costly to the association because when one tenant goes away, there's another one right behind him. It's easy. There's a lot of tenants looking to rent because in the crisis, people's credit was impaired and they cannot get mortgage loans. So they are renters until their credit improves. So in that case, if you're dealing with a criminal background, I look at it to see how recent and how egregious. I don't care much looking at arrests because someone can be arrested and be acquitted or charges dropped, which very often happens. But if there's a plea, that's a conviction. So I do look to see how long ago and how severe and the number. And it's one of those, you're taking a chance because there's no case law.
Yeah.
On pets, the biggest problem with pets is not so much what the documents say, although if you have a provision that says household pets only are allowed, what does that mean? What's a household pet? Depends on where you live. I know this won't happen in this county, but in Hawaii, there was a condo where the owner wanted to have a 1,200-pound hog, Susie, claiming that's a common household pet in that rural area of Hawaii. The owner won. That big animal was allowed to stay because common household pets don't mean anything. So I like to define them. Now on the fair housing side, which is not really an amendment, but it's a warning that if someone mentions I have a disability, so I need an accommodation to be relieved of any one or more of the pet restrictions. Usually it seems to be in the pet area, whether it's I have a larger pet than allowed, I have more than one when the limit may be one, or it's a vicious breed that's not allowed by the documents, but that's the animal that I'm asking for the accommodation. And if you can get a doctor or even a medical provider, that's not even an MD, to send a letter to the association saying, this is my patient, this is the general diagnosis, this is why it's necessary to have this particular accommodation to benefit that person's treatment or whatever accommodation, you're going to be hard pressed to disapprove that. But when you get, and if they breathe in that direction, you smile, will say, we'll get back to you right away. If you delay, that's the equivalent of a denial. If you discourage, you have even negative body language, we don't allow that here, that's a problem. Call the attorney. It's an inexpensive call to find out what information maybe is still lacking. The doctor maybe didn't say enough, didn't say why it's necessary, just say it'd be nice. So there's some ways to get the doctor to embellish. And some doctors and there's online doctors that don't even see the patient and will send out these letters for a small amount of money. So it's getting bad. You're probably reading about these exotic animals as people's service animals. Actually, they're called a service animal is more of an ADA, whereas in the fair housing area, which applies to associations, they're called companion pets or emotional support animals.
Yeah.
A fair housing animal is not a pet. It's considered an animal. That may result in an accommodation for that animal if the disability is such that it warrants that accommodation.